Hi everyone, welcome to the Pro MMA Betting Podcast. Apologies for last week. We did put a video up for UFC 234, but I had some sound difficulties. When I transferred it over to YouTube, a lot of people were having problems hearing what I was saying. So ultimately I ended up just taking the video down. I didn't have time to redo it. I'm not the best with technology, so I didn't really know how to sort it out either, and I didn't have the time to look too far into it. So problems are resolved for this week though, so we will be back to normal. Quick recap just on how the premium service from Pro MMA Betting has done the last couple of weeks. So last week UFC Fortaleza, we had a clean sweep. We was on Damian Maia. We also had a double, Chris Colbert, who is a boxer, plus Marlon Moraes. That hit for a clean sweep on pre-bets. We had marginal live betting profit. We did make significant live betting profit on the boxing last week though, same night as UFC Fortaleza. Ted Cheeseman in the main event. That was a British boxing show. Ted Cheeseman was the home fighter. It's hard to get a decision when you're the away fighter in England. But the Spanish chap that he fought was just relentless from round one. I thought he was going to slow down. I didn't know if he could keep that pace going, but by kind of round 5 he was still setting a relentless pace. Didn't look like he was going to slow down, and the lines were still very generous in his favour on live betting. So we made some big profit on audio live betting on that particular boxing fight. And this week UFC 234, we had a clean sweep on UFC pre-bets again. So 2 weeks in a row clean sweeps on the UFC. We took a very small loss on Bellator, and we made marginal audio live betting profit from UFC 234. So on pre-bets, I think we're up about 9 units over the last 2 UFCs, and that's with deducting the 1 unit Bellator loss. And with live betting, we're significantly up over the last 2 UFCs, including the boxing event that we made substantial profit on last week. So if you are a 100 unit bettor in 2019 with me, you would be up over £3,000 or $3,000, whatever your denomination is. So as you can see, we make money for you guys. We're a profitable service. You would have easily covered a yearly membership so far. It's $440, £350. You would have earned or covered that cost and then made pretty much 90% on top. So check the website out, prommabetting.com. Pre-betting packages available, live betting audio packages available, both combined available. And please give me a follow on Twitter at prommabetting.com. Sorry, at Pro MMA Betting. And also please hit the subscribe button for YouTube, trying to get the subscribers up as quickly as I can. So please subscribe to the channel if you like what you hear. We're now going to move on. We're going to talk about the UFC this Sunday. UFC on ESPN, headlined by the returning Cain Velasquez taking on Francis Ngannou. So we're going to work our way through the whole fight card as per usual. So first fight on the card in the women's strawweight division, we've got Alexandra Albu taking on Emily Whitmire. So I went back and had to remind myself about Albu. We haven't seen her for some time. She fights pretty sporadically. 28 years of age now. She's only had 3 professional fights. 2 of them have been in the UFC. She made a UFC debut in April 2015. Then she had over 2 years out, fought Kron back in July 2017, and not fought since. Had over 2 years out, and now she's had about 18 months out. So I'm not sure how serious she takes her MMA career. Looking on her Instagram, there's a lot of arse photos and so forth, so it seems like she does a bit of modelling and on the side. Yeah, I'm not sure where she's at in terms of how serious she's taking this as a career. Looking at her in terms of how she fights, she's very strong. She's powerful. Her stand-up's okay. She's got heavy hands for a lady in the strawweight division. She definitely packs some power. She's very raw though. She goes for a lot of head and arm throws, which, as we know, I don't know why it's so prevalent in women's MMA, but it's such a risky move. You give your back going for a head and arm throw, but yeah, she's big on head and arm throws. I think a lot of it is from her rawness, where she's just not had any ring time. She throws with power. Her stand up is okay, but she does put everything into every shot, and subsequently she does slow down. Her fight with Isabella Baderek, I went back and watched it. She managed to cinch up a guillotine, but the guillotine, it wasn't a technical guillotine. The way if you watch it, so Baderek shoots in, takes her down, gets caught in a guillotine, and the way Albu cinches her legs up is not the way you're supposed to do it. But she just manages to power the guillotine, get the submission. Baderek's not a good fighter at all, so she didn't know how to defend. And then the Cain Kron fight, she started strong, but she just slows down. Kron managed to take over, won the third round. She won the first 2 rounds, but they was fairly back and forth. So I'm definitely not sold on her as a prospect. She definitely needs to fight more regular, but I think the UFC have brought her in here because she's Russian, she's good looking, she's attractive, or at least that was their initial idea when they offered her first fight when she fought in Europe. I think maybe since then they've kind of given up on her. I'm not sure why she's had these long stints of not fighting. But she's got Emily Whitmire here, who Emily's well trained, she's well schooled, she's a good grappler. We saw her on The Ultimate Fighter. She beat Christina Marks very quickly in the opening round. She then lost to Roxanne Modafferi in the first round. She got stopped with ground and pound. Someone told me that afterwards she spoke of how she just wanted out and broke mentally in that fight, so that is a little bit of a concern for me. Since then she's made a UFC official debut against Gillian Robertson, got caught in a really nice armbar from Gillian, and then last time out she had a decent performance against Jamie Moyle, managed to outstrike Jamie in the first round. Second round was more competitive. Third round she hit a nice takedown early in the round and managed to keep top control. So for me, this is Whitmire needs to survive round 1. I do have some question marks in my head as to how durable she is, just because of what I was told about her comments after the Roxanne fight, about how she broke mentally and just wanted to get out of there. So that is a bit of a concern with me, because Alexandra Albu is going to bring the heat in round 1. She does hit hard, she is physically strong, she is going to come out aggressive. So I just need to see how Whitmire copes in round 1. As long as she survives round 1, based on what we've seen from Albu, I think this is a winnable fight for Whitmire. She is the more well-trained fighter. She's going to struggle to keep Albu off though. She hasn't got any power on her feet. Her stand-up isn't particularly good. I mean, it's okay in a technical aspect, but she just doesn't have any power, whereas Albu does bring some heat for the division. She's gonna have to survive round 1, try and get some takedowns. Albu might go for a head and arm throw, so she might be able to take her back off of that. I'm definitely not trusting Albu as a favourite. The betting line, she's a -165 favourite. Whitmire is plus 145. UK book, she's still plus 160. After tape, I was gonna have a small bet on Whitmire, but it's such a low level fight this. We've not seen Albu for over 18 months. She may have improved. She does have the advantage standing, but I do feel she will slow down. Whitmire hit a really nice takedown on Jamie Moore in round 3, but if she can't get a finish, she's going to need to win 2 of the rounds here. So I think round 1 could be a bit dicey for her. As long as she gets through that though, I do fancy her to take over. She trains at, I haven't double checked recently, or not since I watched tape, which was probably over a week ago, but I think Whitmire's at Extreme Couture. So she's at a solid camp. If she's not at Extreme Couture, she's at the other camp. I can't remember what the other one is off the top of my head in Vegas. She's at one of the 2. She seems to train full time, does a little bit of waitressing on the side, but predominantly seems to be kind of fully invested in this game. So I'm going to pick Whitmire here. I think she can survive round 1, and I think her being well trained as opposed to Alexandra Albu just trying to basically physical everything and use her physical gifts over technique, it's going to find her unstuck here, especially if she starts going for them sloppy head and arm throws. She isn't good off her back either. Her top control is not good. I noticed against Kron she couldn't maintain top control on Kron. So she's going to have to win this fight on the feet, and I think she's going to have to get Whitmire out in round 1 to win this. So I'm going to go with Whitmire. I'm probably passing just because of, has elbow improved? There's some possibilities she could have, and Whitmire, how durable is she when she's under fire? She admitted she folded against Roxanne Modafferi, and she's going to come under fire here. So pass for me on a betting perspective, but I am picking Whitmire, and I don't blame anyone for taking a small bet on Whitmire. I wouldn't recommend anything above a unit here because it's low level women's MMA. Anything could happen. Next, it's another women's strawweight fight. Jessica Penne against Jodie Esquibel. Guys, completely honest here, I refuse to watch tape on this. I can't be asked to put myself through the chore of doing tape on these two. I know the last fight was low level, but I kind of wasn't familiar with either, so I didn't mind doing tape. But I know Penne, I know Esquibel, they're not the best to watch. They're low level. A guy that I respect in the industry has actually bet Esquibel. He thinks she should be a slight favourite. I still can't be asked to watch tape on this. They're both low level fighters. I'm not even making a prediction. I'm just completely passing this fight, guys. So I'm going to move straight on to the last fight on Fight Pass, which is Renan Barão taking on Luke Sanders. Quick look over the stats for these two. So Sanders is a couple of years younger than Barão. Barão's 32, I think now. Barão's got a 3-inch reach advantage. They're the same height, both 5'6". Luke Sanders, high output. He averages almost 6 significant strikes per minute. Renan Barão is at 3.7. Both absorb a similar amount. They're around 3.7 each. Takedown accuracy, 45% for Barão, 33% for Sanders. Sanders doesn't really go for takedowns. Renan Barão averages 1.5 takedown attempts per 15 minutes, so doesn't overly go for them himself. Barão's always had fantastic takedown defense. Luke Sanders at 70%. From what we've seen, his takedown defense seems okay, but I do expect this to be a fight played out on the feet, basically. So Renan Barão, the ex-bantamweight king of the UFC. I mean, let's not beat around the bush here. He is completely shot as a fighter. I personally am surprised that he's fighting again. He's been with American Top Team his last few camps. Left Nova and Yao. I've probably mentioned on the podcast before, once USADA came in, Nova and Yao, I mean, except for Jose Aldo, everyone there has fallen apart. I definitely think they were cheating over there. I definitely think Renan Barão he's dropped off a cliff. I don't think it's just due to USADA. I think physically he's just fallen apart. He's had 40 fights. I mean, it is a lot of fights, but it's not that many, you know. You see plenty of guys that have had that many fights who aren't as shot as Barão. I think the weight cut's taken its toll on Barão. I think that has broke his body down. I think post USADA he's just not the same, and he has started to accumulate some damage in his last few fights. He's actually lost 6 of his last 8. His only wins in that time are against Mitch Gannon, which were going back over 4 years ago now, and Felipe Nova, which was, I mean, he won a decision, but it wasn't a very inspiring performance, to say the least. He just isn't the same fighter he was. His last 3 fights, he's definitely looked shot to me. He's got losses to Aljamain Sterling, which isn't a bad loss. Aljamain's a very solid fighter, but Brian Kelleher just destroyed him, out-savaged him, had him badly hurt at the end of the 3rd round. And Andre Ewell, it says a split decision loss, but it was a clear unanimous decision loss. He won the 1st round with some top control, was getting outstruck in round 2. He got a takedown, I think, with about 1.5 minutes left. Didn't do anything with a takedown, so there was no way he deserved round 2, and got easily outstruck round 3. We've seen Andre Ewell fight recently against Nathaniel Wood, who, Nathaniel's a good prospect, don't get me wrong, but I mean, he exposed Andre Ewell in that fight, made him look like the fighter he looked on tape prior to his UFC debut. So for him to take Barão apart like that, he was landing some big shots. I think Burrell's chin is about to go. I honestly think someone's close to him should be telling him to hang his gloves up. He's done as a fighter as far as I'm concerned. I'm struggling to remember seeing a fighter as shot as Renan Barão. He really, really is shot to pieces for me. And yeah, I don't really like to see him in it. I'm hoping if he loses this fight, I hope he loses this fight because I'm hoping he'll then hang him up. If he wins, he's probably going to be delusional and think he can keep going. But I'd really like to see him hang the gloves up and put his efforts into something else, training fighters or whatever it may be, because I just think he is completely shot. He's facing Luke Sanders here, who, as you may be aware, Luke, he's a solid fighter, but he's actually older than Renan Barão. He's actually 33 according to Sherdog. Let me just go back to Fight Metric. Fight Metric's got him listed 33. Yeah, he's actually the older fighter. Crazy really, he's the older fighter here, and he's had a lot less fights, and Renan's the shot fighter. But Luke, he's got a lot of potential, but very flaky fighter. I don't think he's ever going to get rid of that, especially at his age now. He's 33, as we just said. So he came into the UFC, he beat Maximo Blanco, very impressive performance, dropped him and submitted him in the first round. Absolutely pounded Yuri Alcantara for 1.5 rounds and just seemed to quit in a knee bar that it was just bizarre the way he tapped. I just didn't seem to fight the knee bar at all, just seemed to give in, and he'd absolutely hammered Yuri Alcantara. Andrei Sukumtov, he was comfortably winning that fight. Gets caught with a punch in the second round. I still argue maybe it was slightly premature, the stoppage there, but still in complete control and flakes out. Patrick Williams kind of made harder work of that fight than I was expecting, but for all Patrick's faults, he's extremely explosive and he hits hard, and I think he did hurt. I think it was in the second round. I think he hurt Sanders, which made Sanders a little bit more hesitant as they went into the third round. Renan Barão doesn't offer that explosion or that power, so it's probably not something you have to worry about here. And then last time out, Rani Yahya caught him in a heel hook very quickly. So Sanders is a flaky fighter. That there is that worry with him. Renan Barão's gas tank, I didn't touch on that. He gasses every fight now as well. He missed weight as well his last fight by 7 pounds. I don't know why he's trying to go back down to bantamweight. As I said, I think that is one of the reasons he's shot. I think his body's just battered from the cut. Luke Sanders is a big bantamweight. He's physically strong. For all his flakiness, I'm picking Luke Sanders here. I just think Renan Barão is just a shot fighter. A betting line, Sanders, I think he's minus 175 now. You don't really want to bet Sanders as a favourite. He's just one of them fighters you'd prefer to bet him as a dog because he is flaky. But I have to pick him to win here because Renan Barão for me is just done as a force in the bantamweight division. The only way I see him winning this fight is somehow catching something in round 1. I don't think he can knock Sanders out. I was trying to think earlier, when was the last time Renan Barão KO'd someone? So I'm just having a quick look. I know he got the spinning back kick win over Eddie Wineland, but I think that was a premature stoppage. I've not rewatched it for years, but I remember at the time and kind of vividly remember that I didn't agree with the stoppage. But besides that, he's got no TKO wins since, well, we're going back to 2009, so I can't see him. It'd be a huge shock if he won this on the feet. His submission threat, he did stop Uriah Faber with strikes straight after the Eddie Wineland fight. I don't actually remember that Uriah Faber fight at all. But still, I'd still be shocked if he managed to get a TKO win here. And submission, he did submit Mitch Gannon. Managed to do that in the third round. I can't see that happening here because Barão is just useless by the third round. I think he's going to struggle for takedowns. Before that, it was the Michael McDonald fight who he dominated. I remember that fight vaguely, dominated him, but that was like 6 years ago. So I'm going to go Sanders here. I think Barão's taken a lot of punishment. His last couple of fights, cracks in the chin have started to appear. He has been stopped previously as well. Sanders does hit hard. I think Sanders can get the stoppage here, so I'm going to pick Sanders. It's not a massively confident pick because he's flaky, but Henan Brown needs to hang up his gloves, and I hope he does after this fight, because I've got concerns for his health now. He's looking that shot in there, so I really hope someone close to him has a word with him after this fight. So I'm going Luke Sanders, and I think he can get the KO win here. Next we move to lightweight. Really good fight this. Scott Holtzman taking on Nick Lentz. Stats for these two are pretty similar height, similar reach. Holtzman 1 inch reach advantage. Holtzman does average 4.5 significant strikes per minute. Nick is down at 3.5. They absorb a similar amount at 3. They both go for takedowns. Nick Lentz is a Division 1 wrestler. He averaged 3.5 takedown attempts per 15 minutes. Scott is just under 3. Scott's takedown actually is really high, 59%. Nick Lentz 35%, but he's been in the UFC longer and he's faced higher caliber of opposition. Holtzman takedown defense 60%, and Nick Lentz down at 44% actually, quite low surprisingly for a wrestler of his caliber. So Scott Holtzman kind of came into the UFC pretty raw fighter, hadn't cut his teeth that much on the regional scene, but he has definitely made big strides as a fighter. He's pretty old now, he's 35 years of age, so kind of a late start. I think he was an ex-pro NHL player, NHL player, hockey player. Made his debut against Anthony Christodoulou, who is a terrible fighter. Won that fight, then he lost to Drew Dober. Dober won that managed to hit a few takedowns in that fight from the body lock. He then beat Cody Pifster, who just isn't good at all. He dominated him in that fight. He had a really good fight with Josh Emmett. I bet Josh Emmett in that fight, and I remember he took round 1 off Emmett. Rounds 2 and 3 were competitive as well. It was a real war, that fight, really entertaining fight. Josh Emmett's power just ended up being a bit too much for Scott in that fight, and it was a big step up in competition. Although he'd fought Dober, who's probably on a similar level to Josh Emmett. Then he had a fight with Michael McBride, who isn't UFC caliber at all. Won that fight easily. Darrell Hulcher, comfortable win there. Actually used takedowns in that fight. Hulcher's got pretty big power on the feet, and he did hurt him at some point in that fight. But his breakout performance was his last fight against Alan Patrick. He looked absolutely fantastic in that fight. Previously, Holtzman had shown not the best takedown defense, but he'd always shown solid get-ups, really good at getting back to his feet. Never held down on his back for long. As I said, his takedown percentage is pretty high. I don't think he took Alan Patrick down, but he did. I mean, you look at the caliber of opposition, it's not the best, so you can't read too much into that stat like he's some kind of takedown artist. But he's at the MMA lab and he's definitely improved as a fighter, and looked really good against Alan Patrick. Hit some great counters on Alan Patrick in that fight. Takedown defense looked on point. Alan Patrick, not the most technical wrestler, but very explosive takedowns, good grappling, but just couldn't get going in that fight at all. Got dropped in round 1 and stopped with some brutal short elbows that put him out cold. So Scott Holtzman is definitely the best version of Scott Holtzman going into this fight. He brings a high pace. He's very tough. He throws with power. Get up game is good, but Nick Lentz is going to be, if Nick Lentz does take him down, this is going to be the best grappler he's been underneath. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Now with Nick Lentz, I've got to admit, I did think Nick Lentz was kind of heading towards shot territory, but he was cutting down to 145. Apparently it caused a lot of issues with his body trying to make that cut, so he's moved back up to 155. He's got a loss to David Taymor and Islam Makhachev. Makhachev's a beast, just out grappled him, so I'm not taking too much away from him there. David Taymor's a difficult fighter to look good against when you're a grappler, if you can't get him down. He was fairly competitive with David Taymor, hit a few takedowns, but David just managed to get back to his feet really quickly. He beat the ghost of Gray Maynard. I said Henan Burrell's the most shot fighter I've ever seen. Maybe it's Gray Maynard. But yeah, he beat Gray Maynard in his last fight, and he's got a win before the David Taymor fight against Will Brooks. He was He was losing that fight to Brooks. Brooks was starting to look pretty good on the feet. Brooks, silly fight IQ, took him down and got guillotined. He has got a dangerous guillotine, Nick Lentz. He can overhunt for it. That is a bit of an issue he has. But yeah, you have to be careful when you're going for takedowns on him. Gray Maynard, it's hard to read too much into that fight because Gray is so shot. Gray did actually land a massive right hand on Lentz in the second round that kind of stunned him. But Lentz managed to land a head kick, drop him, and referee stepped in. He is training at Hard Knocks now, which is formerly the Black Zillions camp. I think he's been there for 3 camps now since the Will Brooks fight. Stand-up does seem to be improving. He's switching stances now, which I don't think we'd seen out of him previously. And he does keep talking about how his stand-up's underrated. This fight for me is a tough one to call. I definitely think the momentum's with Scott Holtzman. Definitely look like the guy that's improving. Has Nick Lentz's stand-up improved? Did look better against Maynard, but it's, as I said, hard to take too much of a read into that because of how shot Gray is. I mean, he didn't get obliterated by David Tamor. It was a fairly competitive fight, but he struggled with his speed. Scott Holtzman, I mean, speed-wise, they're probably fairly similar. Can Nick Lentz get takedowns on Scott? Before the Patrick fight, you'd say, yeah, definitely. I'm not so confident now. Can he keep Holtzman down, who does show, or has shown very good get-ups, but Scott does give his back when he's getting up. He's got away with it so far. But if Lentz does get him down, it will be the best grappler he's faced in the UFC who's been on top of him. So I don't have a 100% read on this fight, I've got to admit, because I'm just not sure where Nick Lentz is at. He was losing to Brooks, pulled out the guillotine, lost to David Tamor, but he was fairly competitive, and then he beat the ghost of Gray Maynard. Kind of after the Islam fight, that's when I thought he was just starting to look a little bit shot worn, because he beat Michael McBride the fight before that, and don't get me wrong, he won comfortably enough, but I remember just not being overly impressed with the performance, and had a very close fight with Danny Castillo fight before that. So I'm going to go with Scott Holtzman here. I think it's going to be a very competitive fight, but Scott is really good at making fights really gritty, bringing a high pace. Stand-up looked better his last fight. Some really good counters. He's got more power on the feet. He is going to have to get back up if he does get taken down. He needs to be careful given his back here, but I'm going to go with Scott. Going into watching tape, I was expecting to maybe come out with wanting to bet Scott. He's minus 190 at the moment. My read just isn't 100% on the fight, so I'm going to pass. I probably would have taken a stab at Scott if this was closer to evens. Nick Lentz does have a path to victory. If we remove the Patrick fight, Holtzman has been taken down in a lot of fights. Drew Dober used predominantly a grappling heavy approach to beat him. But against Patrick, his takedown defence did look better, his striking looked better, and the Drew Dober fight is 3 years ago, so we are going back some time. He's clearly improved since then, Scott. But we haven't really seen he hasn't faced a wrestler in the UFC. I mean, you look at the opponent since Dober, Cody Piffster's a wrestler, but he's just not UFC quality. Josh Emmett hit a few takedowns on him, but he got back to his feet quickly. But Michael McBride, Daryl Hulcher, they're not a wrestling threat. But Patrick, that's how he's got all his wins in the UFC, through wrestling, and Scott looked really good. So Nick Lentz keeps talking about his stand-up. He's probably going to be content to stand, try and mix in his wrestling. I just think the bigger, more eye-catching shots are going to come from Scott. I think he will get back to his feet if he's taken down. He does need to be careful given his back low. But I'm going to go with Scott Holtzman to win a competitive decision here, but it's not something I fancy betting. I'll be interested to see what Scott Holtzman decision pays. I imagine it's not going to be great, but I'll have a look at it. It's probably going to be about evens. So Scott Holtzman to win a decision there, but I've not got a 100% read on that fight. It's going to be interesting to see how that fight plays out, because it'll tell me a lot more about where Scott is at in terms of his future development, and hopefully getting a better read on him for future fights. Nick Lentz, I don't expect to kind of be around for much longer. He is, I mean, I know Holtzman's older, but Nick's had a lot more fights. He's probably more shot worn. So yeah, Holtzman decision is the pick in that one. Next we've got a flyweight fight, Ashlee Evans-Smith taking on Andrea Lee. So Andrea Lee, she made her UFC debut. She beat Veronica Macedo. I didn't think it was an overly impressive performance. I don't think very highly of Veronica Macedo. Andrea was outstruck from distance on the feet. She did her best work when she managed to close the distance, get the tie plum, and she used a pretty grappling heavy approach in that fight. She was either winning the fight in the clinch or from top control. Outstruck at range, although Veronica does have some decent stand up at range, got a decent striking background, but yeah, it wasn't kind of the performance I was maybe expecting. I hadn't really seen much of Lee prior to the UFC, but she did have a bit of hype coming in, but I wasn't massively impressed with her in that fight. Ashlee Evans-Smith, she's got a wrestling background, she's a big girl. I don't know if Lee's going to be able to take her down. I expect this to be on the feet. I think it's going to be a close fight. I didn't do loads of research on this because I saw Andrea Lee was a decent sized favourite. She's now sitting at, she's actually come down a bit, she's minus 190 now. I think when I saw her she was about minus 250, so there was no way I was going to be betting Lee. I mean Ashlee is nearly a 2-1 underdog, so I can completely see why people would be having a look at her in this spot. It's a pass for me. She hasn't impressed me in the UFC either, really. She beat Veronica Macedo as well. She managed to stop her, but that was up at 135. Ketlin Vieira, I think she got outstruck in that fight. Sarah Miraz, she took her down and got armbarred from the bottom, and then she got a win over Beck Rawlins last time out, striking fight. We've not seen her for nearly a year, so yeah, I just imagine this to be a fairly low level women's fight. I imagine it's probably going to be on the feet. I know Evans-Smith doesn't really use her wrestling, even though she's got that wrestling background, because I remember looking at her before and just having to pass on considering her for a bet. So yeah, it's a pass for me. I guess if you want to, from a betting angle, I would look at Evans-Smith, but I haven't really done much tape on this fight because I knew that I wasn't going to be touching it as a better. The over's probably free money, but it's going to be juiced. So I'm going to pick my gut says the value's on Ashlee Evans-Smith as the underdog, so as a better I will always side with the person I feel who has value. I think this probably should be more a pick-em, so I'm going to say Ashlee Evans-Smith to win a decision here, but not a confident pick. Low level fight, I haven't done much research on it. I saw Lee's last fight though recently against Macedo and just wasn't impressed. Ashlee Evans-Smith has never impressed me either, so yeah, it's not a great fight. I'm not particularly looking forward to this. I don't think either has much potential in the division personally, but going to be a close competitive fight. Ashlee Evans-Smith, split decision. So back to the men's bantamweight division, we've got 13-0 Manny Bermudez with 10 submission wins, taking on Team Alpha Male's Benito Lopez. Manny Bermudez, very dangerous grappler, one of those guys that very opportunistic. You have to be very careful mixing on the floor with him. He's had 2 UFC fights. He's faced Albert Morales, managed to cinch up a lovely guillotine choke in the second round, and Davey Grant, who he managed to hit a very quick submission on when he faced him back in July. So really dangerous grappler, very opportunistic. Striking seems like a work in process, doesn't seem great. I think he's definitely going to struggle when he's facing a decent striker who he can't get to the floor. I don't think Bermudez's takedowns are great, but he's one of them kind of scrambly guys that just drags fights to the mat any which way he can. He did drop Davey Grant, to be fair to him. That's how he got the quick submission win there. The fight was on the floor very, very quickly because he dropped him. So his hands may be improving. He's only young. It's always dangerous to bet against fighters improving at that young age. So yeah, he does need to shore up his stand-up though. It still looks fairly loose. But I'm going off the Morales fight here, which was a year ago. The Davey Grant fight was so quick, you didn't get to see it extensively. So he could have definitely improved in a year at such a young age. But very, very dangerous grappler, very opportunistic. Benito Lopez, we saw on the Dana White Contender Series, took on Steven Peterson, who Peterson isn't the best fighter, but he's a savage. That guy just is in your face for 3 rounds. Won a close decision win there. Stuffed a lot of Peterson's takedowns. Landed some decent strikes. What I didn't like was Peterson got a takedown in round 2, passed to side control very easily and managed to keep the position for, I think it was at least around 3 minutes in round 2. So that doesn't leave me with a great or a high read on how good Lopez's ground game is, or his bottom game. I mean, being held in side control by Steven Peterson for a good 3 minutes isn't a great look when you're taking on Manny Bermudez. He then fought Albert Morales, so mutual opponent there. Albert Morales had his back, not his back strictly, but he had a real waistlock for about the last 3 minutes of round 1 from a standing position against the cage that Benito couldn't escape from. I remember when that fight actually happened live, I live betted Morales. I actually thought he won that decision. It was a close fight, but I did think he deserved a nod there. Benito, he favours standing up basically. He throws way too many flying knees and things of such nature. Throwing stuff like that against Manny Bermudez, you leave yourself open to takedowns. You don't want to be on your back against Manny Bermudez. We haven't seen Benito as well for over a year, so there could be improvements there. He's at a very good camp. He's at Alpha Male. But from what I've seen, I have to go Manny Bermudez. I think Benito is probably the better striker, but as I said, Manny could have shored that up. We've not really seen him involved in a extended striking battle on the feet for some time now, so there could be improvements. But I'm very confident he's the stronger grappler. As I said, I didn't like what I saw on his back against Steven Peterson. I think Manny Bermudez is going to get a submission here, possibly in the first round. His takedowns aren't great, and Benito did show some decent takedown defence when he faced Steven Peterson. I think he stuffed most of Peterson's takedown attempts except the one in the second round where he ended up on his back. I think he got taken down in round 1 but got straight back up. But you've just got to be so careful. Even if you land on your bum, just getting back to your feet, you can't give your back against someone like Manny. So I am going to pick Manny here to win by submission. But I'm really hoping we see some of this fight play out on the feet just to get a better read on how good Manny Bermudez's stand-up now is. It's also going to be interesting to see how he gets Benito, or if he can get Benito to the floor. So we'll get a better idea on his wrestling as well moving forward. He's like a -260 favourite. Not something I'm going to touch myself because I still think he's, from what I've seen anyway, as I said, there could be improvements, but takedown wise and stand-up wise he's still pretty raw, but very dangerous grappler. I don't like betting on people who are still pretty one-dimensional in the UFC in this day and age, but from what I've seen I think he's going to have enough to defeat Lopez and win I think he's going to win by submission. But I really hope this goes into second, third round so we get to see his cardio, get to see his stand-up, get to see his wrestling, and maybe get to see how he deals with some adversity. So Bermudez submission. Last fight on the preliminary card, we move to the men's bantamweight division. We've got Jimmie Rivera taking on Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain has a 3-inch height and reach advantage here. They're same age, Similar amount of significant strikes landed per minute, both around 4. Aljamain absorbs less, 1.4. Jimmie's 3.3. Aljamain attempts takedowns far more than Jimmie. Jimmie's basically at 1 takedown average per fight. Aljamain's 2.3. Jimmie's takedown accuracy 27%. Aljamain's 36%. Takedown defense for Jimmie 100%, so never been taken down. Aljamain 51%. Jimmie trains out of Tiger Schulman, very well established camp. We've seen they've got a number of very good fighters in the UFC at the moment, so he's got real good training partners around his weight class. He's been in the UFC now for 3 or 4 years. Made his debut against Marcus Brimage, blew him away in the first round. Had a very good back and forth fight with Pedro Munoz, won a split decision there. Then he beat Yuri Alcantara, Uriah Faber, Thomas Almeida. Got stopped by Marlon Morales and won a kind of clear unanimous decision against John Dodson back in September. So Jimmie is built like a manlet. He hasn't really fought anyone with great takedowns, so he does have 100% takedown defense, but I don't know how much to read into that at this stage. But I imagine just on his build and his explosion and how fast he is that he's going to be tough to take down. The guy has no neck, so I imagine he's going to be very difficult to choke. But yeah, very strong physical guy, so although that 100% takedown defense reading could be a little bit misleading, I do imagine him to have stout takedown defense. He's basically a technical boxer. He's got solid hands, good boxing, has to get in the pocket because he's pretty small, 5'4", not the biggest reach either, so he does need to get inside people's reaches who are if he does face rangier opponents. But yeah, nice boxing, good leg kicks. Few question marks over his chin. He did get stopped by Dennis Bermudez pre-UFC on The Ultimate Fighter. That's a number of years ago though. Been dropped a few times in fights in the UFC, and he did get stopped by Marlon Morales as well last year. Probably doesn't really matter here against Aljamain Sterling, but something to bear in mind. But yeah, I mean, he's a solid fighter, Jimmie. He never blows you away with performances. I've never come away from one of his fights thinking, wow, he kind of does enough to win fights. He can drop rounds. He did drop a round to Pedro Munoz. The judges, or one of the judges, thought he dropped 2. I thought he won that fight 2-1. Dropped a round to Yuri Alcantara as well. Beat Uriah Faber, who wasn't the kind of same fighter when they fought. I bet Jimmie in that fight. I remember it was about -130, which I thought was a really, really good line, and he won the fight clearly, but I felt he could have done a little bit more in that fight to kind of put a stamp on it. Beat Thomas Almeida, had a really strong first round, but Almeida came back into that fight and ultimately ended up kind of using his wrestling in the 3rd round, so dropped around there, stopped by Morales, and won all 3 rounds against John Dodson. Not really sure where John Dodson's at these days. Doesn't seem like the same fighter. Again though, uninspiring performance. I've just not been blown away by Jimmie. Don't get me wrong, very solid fighter, good hands, very physically strong. I imagine he's going to be very difficult to take down and hold down and to try and choke. But yeah, I've just never come away thinking, wow, I can see this guy being champion. I can't. I just don't think he's done enough in fights. I mean, maybe I'm underestimating him a bit like people underestimate Sun Sao, just because he's kind of similar, just never emphatic performances. I mean, since he's been in the UFC, except for his debut performance against Brimage, every fight that he's won, so since then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decision wins in a row. Knockout loss to Marlon Morales. Yeah, it just doesn't get people talking, unfortunately. As technical as you can be, as good as you can be. Yeah, and so maybe partly me underappreciating him as a fighter, because he's a very solid fighter, but yeah, just hasn't had a standout performance really. But maybe we'll see that here against Aljamain Sterling. For Aljamain, this is going to be his 12th fight in the UFC. For me, he has improved greatly, especially recently. I've been really, really impressed by him. I actually went into tape thinking he was a bit of an Elias Theodorou clone in the stand-up sense, but I was completely off with my read, and I completely take that back. Since the Rafael Assunção fight, I think he's made, well, since before that, since the Caraway fight, I think he's made great strides. He won round 1 against Caraway, but then he gassed and got out grappled the last 2 rounds. But so then he had the Assunção fight, so this is 2 years ago now. I actually think he beat Assunção. I think the judges were fooled in round 2 by a knockdown that wasn't. Rafael threw a right hand. Looked like to the naked eye that he dropped Sterling, but on the replay you see that the punch actually hit the shoulder and it didn't actually drop Sterling. He just slipped, so that probably lost him that round, because I scored that fight for Aljo if you disregard a knockdown. And since then, his stand-ups just looks so much better. I mean, he's got those rangy kicks that he throws, but he's got more aggressive. His hands have got better. He's still, fundamentally, he does things differently that maybe aren't textbook, and maybe holds his chin a bit high. But there's definitely been improvements with this guy, big time. He had a brutal knockout loss to Marlon Morales. A little bit fluky. Marlon was trying to throw a head kick and caught him with his knee. But a really, really bad knockout. But he's responded really well. He looked great against Brett Johns, and then he beat Cody Stammen. I was a little worried with how he'd come back from that knockout, because it was so brutal. You don't know if there could be some kind of mental apprehension moving forward for Aljo, but he seems to have put that to one side, put it in his rearview mirror, and continued to move forward. So I've definitely been impressed by his improvements in the stand-up. I think Aljo's quite a hard guy to get a full read on. I think due to Aljo's style, he's quite hard to get a read on, because he will throw a lot of kicks from distance. He will come in with strikes, move back out, and he will go for a lot of takedowns. So I think it's quite hard for opponents to get in a rhythm against him, because you kind of just don't know what he's going to do. He has gotten a bit more aggressive as well in recent fights, not so much standing on the outside. He is more content to take the front foot and use his hands more. Does have to be careful of Jimmie's power, because Jimmie does throw hard. He's very good in the pocket, tight punches. But I definitely think Aljo's a live dog here. The betting line is actually starting to drop. Jimmie was minus 200 for a while, but he's minus 170 now. Aljo plus 150. I'm actually picking Aljo here. I think it's going to be a close fight, but like I said, I just think he could make it difficult for Jimmie to get in a rhythm. He's going to be throwing them kicks. He's going to be using his improved hands. He's got the reach advantage. Obviously, Jimmie's used to being at a reach disadvantage. There's also the takedown threat. I don't think he's going to get Jimmie down, but just he will shoot for takedowns, and it's just going to keep Jimmie on his toes, that takedown threat, because Aljo's a very, very good grappler. If he gets top position, who knows what's going to happen? We just haven't seen Jimmie on his back or anything. I imagine, as I said, he's a manlet. I think he's just going to power back up. I can't see Aljo having much success on the floor, or even getting him there, but it'll keep him honest with the takedown threats. And I honestly think he can win this on the feet. I think he beat Rafael Assunção on the feet, and that was 2 years ago. Maybe I am underestimating Jimmie. Like I said, I just haven't been blown away by him in the UFC. But I'm going to go Aljo here to pull out a decision win, and I just think the betting line should be, I think it still should be closer. I think it should be more like a pick-'em fight. I might even say I think Sterling should be a small favourite even. So yeah, my gut likes Sterling here, and him as the underdog does surprise me, but it's going to be a close competitive fight. I'm really looking forward to this one, because this is going to kind of show us, has Aljo made that kind of next step to be a contender, or is this going to put Jimmie back into title contention? So really looking forward to this fight, but I'm going to go with Aljo to win a decision here, maybe a split decision. It's going to be a close fight, but I'm going with Aljo to win as the underdog. So we move to the main card now. We've got Andre Fili taking on Myles Jury. This is in the lightweight division. This is another fight where it's hard for me to get a great read on it. There's a few on this card that I just don't, even after tape, I just don't have a great read on how the fight's going to play out. The Ashlee Evans-Smith Andrea Lee fight was one. Scott Holtzman, Nick Lentz, not a great read, and this one just don't feel I have a great read on this fight either. Myles been in the UFC since 2012, was on the Ultimate Fighter where he lost a split decision to Al Quinta. Made his UFC debut against Chris Saunders, won his first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, won his first 6 fights in the UFC. Had that loss to Donald Cerrone where he got grappled in round 1, and then he I think he got outstruck in the next 2 rounds. Had the quick submission loss to Charles Oliveira. Then he disappeared for around 18 months. But he's had 3 fights. This will be his 4th fight in 2 years, so he's picking up the pace again. He's coming back from a KO loss to Chad Mendes where he got stopped in the first round. Before that, won a decision over Rick Glenn, and then his comeback fight, quick, brutal win over Mike De La Torre. Famed for his Jury Jiu-Jitsu, so he's a solid grappler. His striking's solid enough as well. He's a little bit low volume on the feet. He trains at Alliance, close training partner of Jeremy Stevens. He's a well-rounded guy, Myles Jury. He's 30 now, Myles. I thought he was younger than that still, so it's kind of now or never for him really in terms of what direction his career is going to go in. He's got a good record, 17-3, but 3 of them losses have come in his last 5 fights. It's basically when he's stepped up a level, Cerrone, Oliveira, Mendes, he's fallen down. So Andre Fili, Team Alpha Male fighter, he's been in the UFC a long time as well now, since similar time, 2013. Myles Jury was 2012. I've never had a great read on Fili. I've tended to avoid betting on his fights just because I just don't have a great read on him as a fighter. His stand-up's okay. He's got good wrestling. He's got really good timing on his takedowns. His last 3 fights, he beat Artem Lobov. He mainly used takedowns in that fight. Was looking like he was having a few problems on the feet. He lost to Calvin Kattar the fight before that, just got outstruck for 3 rounds. Split decision win over Dennis Bermudez, which I thought Dennis deserved a nod in. And he's coming off a loss to Michael Johnson, that split decision loss. A very close fight, could have gone either way. Basically, he got outstruck, but he managed to get Michael's back in round 2 to win that round. He had some ground control, I think, in round 3 as well. So this fight for me, I'm really struggling with this one. I think it's competitive on the feet. Andre Fili, can he take Myles Jury down? Probably can. If we look at the betting line, Jury is a -175 favourite. I think this should be closer to a pick'em. I'm going to pick Fili. I'm a better. As a better, I think that line's off. I think it should be more closely lined, but probably not going to bet it just because just don't have a great read on the fight at all. Yeah, this card, a few fights on this card are tough for me to read. Normally I can get a read on fights where I think they're going to play out, where the strengths are and so forth, but I mean, as soon as this fight was announced, I thought straight away it's going to be a pass for me, because they're 2 fighters that I've never had a great read on, and now they're facing each other, so that just could spell disaster for me if I try and bet this fight. So I'm going to go with Fili to win a decision because I think the line's off. So anyone that's betting Fili, do not blame you at all. I wouldn't bet Myles Jury as a -175 favourite here. I think this is going to be a really close fight. It's probably, if you do live bet, I think it'd be a really good fight to live bet. But I think Fili is being a little bit underappreciated by bettors here. We'll see. I think the line's going to come in during fight week, but at the minute Fili's still +150, and I think he can win a decision here. Neither of these guys is going to be a contender in this weight class, but they're both good enough, as we've seen. They've been in UFC for many years to hang around for some time yet, but Fili by decision is the pick. Next we go to the welterweight division. We've got Vicente Luque taking on Bryan Barberena. This should be a really good fight. Both pretty high volume strikers. Vicente Luque has crazy power. He's actually got a knockout win, if anyone didn't know, over Thiago Santos a number of years ago now, back in 2012. But yeah, he knocked out Thiago Santos, so gives you an idea as to how much power this guy holds. We've seen in the UFC he lost in his debut to Michael Graves, got wrestled in that fight, but since then he's gone 1, 2, 3, 4. He's gone 7-1. He's finished every single one of them opponents. Couple of submission wins, the rest all knockout wins. He's got a loss to Leon Edwards sandwiched in there, round one against Leon, but just gassed. He put it down to being on the Ultimate Fighter, having to make a number of weight cuts in quick succession, and then the journey over to, I think the fight was in the UK as well. I mean, we haven't seen him gas otherwise, but he's finishing everyone in round one. The Nico Price fight nearly went 2 rounds, but he was in complete control of that fight, so you can't really read too much into his gas tank based off that fight. Need to see him have some adversity again to get a read on whether there is a gas tank issue for me personally. I mean, tremendous power. He's coming off Nico Price was a submission win, but he rocked him badly on the feet, took out Chad Priest on the feet. Jalen Turner was actually ground and pound, but absolutely vicious knockout. And before the Leon fight, folded Belal Muhammad, who is very durable. I mean, we saw that in durability in Belal's last fight and against Aljamain, but just folded by Luque. So Luque has tremendous power, but this is I just don't really get his management and why he's taking some of these fights. He fought Belal Muhammad and Leon Edwards, which is kind of a progression, but this will be his 4th fight in a row where for me he's taking a step back rather than a step forward. And I mean, it's great compiling an impressive highlight reel, but he's just got nothing to gain. I mean, besides having a great highlight reel, he's just got nothing to gain and everything to lose from kind of losing to these guys. And Bryan Barberena, while not a big name, it's a really difficult guy to look good against. He's extremely durable, ridiculous gas tank, and he's got some power in his hands, man. He's got 14 wins and 10 of them are by knockout. You can't disrespect this guy. He's got the goofy dad bod going, but man, he's a solid fighter and his cardio is ridiculous. We've seen he beat Wally Alves. Alves slowed down, he took over. That was in Brazil as well, I believe. Sage Northcutt started strong, but Barberena just doesn't fade. Colby Covington dominated him for 3 rounds. Loads of takedowns. Couldn't keep Bryan down. Bryan kept getting up. Colby set relentless pace. Bryan just didn't slow down whatsoever. I mean, if you look at Bryan's record, whenever he's taken a step up, he's lost. They've both got a mutual opponent in Leon Edwards. He actually dropped Leon in round 2 really heavily. Leon done really well to come back from that. I remember I live betted Barberena, I think at the end of round 2 in that fight. But Leon came back and I think he actually wrestled him in the 3rd round. Actually had more success keeping him down than Colby Covington did. But yeah, so he's lost to Leon, Colby, and took a loss to Chad Priest. He came back at Chad Priest. He won the 3rd round in that fight, but just got outstruck in the first 2 rounds. And he's beaten everyone else. Bryan basically shot Jake Ellenberger last time out, stopped him in the 1st round, stopped Joe Proctor, beat Wally Alves, beat Sage Northcutt, beat Joe Ellenberger, so win over the brothers. Looking at his Instagram, it doesn't look like he's trained at the MMA lab for this fight. I think because I bet him against... No, I didn't bet him against Ellenberger. I nearly did, but I held back in the end. But I think I remember from the Ellenberger fight, he did do some of his camp at MMA Lab, but I think it's quite a journey for him from where he lives. But this time it looks like he hasn't trained there at all. I'd need to hear an interview from him for confirmation of that, but going by his Instagram, not trained at MMA Lab, so little bit of a red flag there for me. Vicente Luque left the Blackzilians, I think, a couple of fights ago now. He's been training back in Brazil for a little while now, so I mean, on paper, Vicente Luque, he is the better striker. He's got a 3-inch reach advantage. He should win this fight, but I've just got that lingering gas tank issue. Now, if Vicente goes out here, wins a 3-round decision, doesn't slow down, that dispels that gas tank issue. But Bryan Barberena is one of the worst guys to face if there is a gas tank issue, and because of that Leon fight, I do still have a question mark there. Vicente's been blowing everyone else away. Barberena's never been KO'd, very durable. I really hope this fight goes 3 rounds, so we get to see Luque in a hard-paced 3-round fight. If he doesn't gas, then we've got to put some... This guy needs to step up. He needs to start being moved along to top 10 fights, because if he doesn't gas here, he's definitely that calibre of fighter. So I'm really intrigued to see how this fight goes. I'm really hoping it's not a quick round 1 knockout. I don't think it will be. Barberena's very durable, but Vicente does have ridiculous power. The betting line for me, as tempting as it is to bet Luque because he's a surging contender, minus 350 isn't. I can't consider it with the gas tank potential issue. It's definitely a pass for me. I mean, he could go out there and blow him away in round 1, but if this goes a hard 3 rounds, this could be really, really competitive, especially the second half of the fight. So, complete pass for me. I mean, Barberena's almost a 3-1 underdog. I'm not going to bet it myself because I would be relying on Luque gassing. That is how I see Barberena winning this fight. But I do think the line should be closer than that, and I guess a lot of people would probably use Luque as a parlay leg, but I definitely won't be. I'll be steering clear. But I'm very intrigued to see how this goes over 3 rounds. I'm going to go with Luque to win a decision. I think he's going to look good in round 1. I think he might do enough to win round 2. Round 3, wouldn't be shocked if Barberena takes round 3. So I'm going to go with Luque to win a 29-28 decision, but I'd love for Luque to win and dominate for 3 rounds here, because then we've got another kind of contender in the welterweight division. But yeah, really interesting fight, this one. I'm really looking forward to it. Next, the men's featherweight division, 145 pounds. We've got Alex Caceres taking on Kron Gracie. Now, I am really, really pumped for this fight. We've not had a Gracie in the UFC for a number of years. I think the last Gracie we had, wasn't it the guy that fought at heavyweight who was absolutely terrible? Before him, I can't remember the last time we had a Gracie in the UFC. Now, what makes this extra special is Kron is the son of Rickson. If you guys have been following MMA for a long time, basically back in the day, Rickson was considered the Don, so to speak, a kind of a mythical figure. Never had many MMA fights. He never came out and really kind of took the step up, but he's just got this aura about him. He's known as being the best Gracie. I think it's kind of an open secret that he was or is the best Gracie in terms of MMA and grappling. Real mythical figure. If you guys haven't seen a documentary called Choke, go and watch it. I haven't seen it for years. I don't think it concentrates just on Rickson. It looks at some of the other fighters as well, but it looks at a group of guys that are competing in a Vale Tudo tournament. I think it was in Japan. Looks at them before the fights and their training and so forth, but it just gives you an idea of the kind of character Rickson is and how deep he is. I actually had the pleasure of meeting him back in 2001. I was in New York and I did a training session at Renzo Gracie's academy, and Rickson walked in like completely unexpectedly. I was on the mats, and kind of everyone was like, whoa, it's Rickson Gracie, because especially back in 2001, early days of MMA, Rickson was held and regarded so high, as it was like a god walking into the dojo. He was there, I believe it was because one of his sons had unfortunately passed away in a motorcycle accident, so it wasn't the best circumstances. Kind of went up to him, shook his hand, passed on my condolences, and just left it at that. I didn't want to bother the guy because obviously he was there for all the wrong reasons. God knows what he was going through. But yeah, so his son Kron Gracie making his UFC debut. Decorated grappler Kron, won the world championships in I know he won it in Nogi. I know he beat Gary Tonnen. Amazing fight. Had Gary in an armbar. No idea how Gary got out of it. Then Gary had his back for a while. Looked like Gary was going to win the fight. Then he manages to tap Gary with literally 2 seconds left with a rear naked choke. So yeah, this guy's grappling is legit. If you're the son of Rickson Gracie, you're going to have legit grappling. Hasn't really fought much though. He's 30 years of age now as well, so I guess it's now or never really for him as a mixed martial artist. He's not fought in 2 years. He trains with the Diaz brothers crew, so it's going to be interesting to see how his stand-ups come along. From the fights I've seen, it was pretty raw, but it's been 2 years since we saw him. Last time we saw him was against Calvillo, who he managed to submit in the second round. They had a 10-minute round one, and then round two managed to submit him. Now Calvillo for me is an absolute beast, very physically strong, great grappler. Even 2 years ago he was on the downside of his career, yeah, but he's still a tough opponent. And man, Kron's grappling is legit. I watched the fight with Takoro as well. Had Takoro's back. Takoro managed to escape, but ultimately he managed to submit him. That was again a 10-minute first round. Got the submission just before the end of the first round. He does pull guard, which in 2019 it's hard for me to trust someone who is still one-dimensional. You can't really get away with that, or you can't get away with it when you step up in competition. That shit doesn't work anymore. It's 2019 now, not the year 2000 or the late 90s. But he was pulling guard against Calvillo, and man, he was making it work. He was still out grappling Calvillo. He'd managed to get his back, he'd tie something up from the bottom, and Calvillo's a powerful man and a legit grappler, so that was impressive. Takoro, I think he got a body lock, shucked to his back. I managed to put him down and take his back. So Caceres is going to have the better striking, I'm pretty sure of that, even though we've not seen Kron's for 2 years. Could have improved. But man, I just don't see how he can stop Kron just getting on his back at some point, pulling him to the mat, pulling guard, and just getting fucked up on the mat. The Caceres is 14-11. He loses fights. He's been submitted 6 times. His takedown defense isn't great. I'm just looking at Caceres' record. I remember he looked pretty good against Cole Miller, but I've not gone back and watched it, but I'm sure Cole Miller take him down in the third round and nearly submit him after dominating the first 2 rounds. Lost to Jason Knight, submitted him. He's not looked good for ages really. If I'm looking at his record, Jason Knight fight he lost. The Yair Rodriguez fight was actually pretty competitive, but it shouldn't have been a split decision though. But lost a 5-round decision. Rolando D was an eye injury win. I remember Rolando D was coming back into that fight. He lost to Wang, split decision. That shouldn't have been a split decision. Clearly lost that fight. And in the Martin Bravo fight, won a split decision. He had Bravo hurt in round 1 and just let Bravo back into the fight. I mean, the more I think of, I mean, I was very against playing Kron as a -350 favourite, and I am a Hickson Gracie fanboy. I have to admit that. So maybe I'm being a little bit deluded that it's his son there in the UFC. I can't recommend anyone betting Kron at -350. Not fought in 2 years. UFC debut. He is very raw. He pulls guard. His striking's not great, but his ground game is legit. Caceres is not great on the ground. He's never going to be. Kron is going to win by submission here, but -350 is steep for a guy that's 4-0, not fought in 2 years. Will be at a disadvantage on the feet, I'm sure, and wrestling isn't great. He is more of a, as I said, he will pull guard, things of such nature. So I'm picking Kron by submission though. I'll be interested to see what the submission prop is. I don't think it's going to be great. It's going to have a minus next to it. I'm pretty sure it's probably not even going to be playable. Will people be using Kron as a parlay leg? Possibly, if they can find another leg they like. Part of me wants to parlay him in some way, but I need to be sensible. I'm not going to do it. As I said, I was really enamoured with Hickson Gracie back in the day, so I need to be as neutral as possible here. -350 against a UFC veteran who is a decent striker, where Kron is going to be the weakest. It's not a smart thing to do, but I am picking Kron by submission here. I think he manages to get Caceres' back in some sort of scramble, or even pulls card and reverses him, or scrambles to his back from the bottom. I expect a submission in, I'm going to say second round, Kron to win by submission, but I'm really hoping his stand-up's going to look okay, and I'm really hoping that he doesn't have to pull guard, because otherwise, he's going to struggle when he takes a step up, and I'd really like to see a Gracie kind of get in contention. He's definitely got the ground game, but this is mixed martial arts, it's not grappling, so we'll see. But Kron submission, the pick. Right, we head back to the women's 115 division. A few fights in that division this particular card. We've got Cortney Casey taking on Cynthia Calvillo. So Cortney Casey is going to have a 3-inch height and reach advantage here. For a woman, she's, especially in this weight division, she's got pretty powerful strikes. She's decent from the bottom. No one's really had too much joy getting much going against her from top position. And the reason you see her on the bottom a lot is because her takedown defense is really, really bad. Like really poor. It sits at 20% takedown defense on Fight Metric. Just does not have good takedown defense whatsoever. She's coming off a win over Angela Hill, which was a striking match, split decision, close fight. Before that, she lost a split to Michelle Walterson. I think she won that fight. I don't agree with that decision, but she lost that decision because she spent too much time on her back. Now, she came close with some submission attempts. She was attempting submissions. She done far more off her back than what Michelle done on top for me, and I thought she won that fight. But ultimately, if you spend time on the bottom, you risk losing decisions. Felice Herrig fight before, split decision loss. Close fight, mainly on the feet. Before that, she beat Jessica Aguilar, who is a shot fighter. Put a pretty big beating on Jessica, but she's got taken down in that fight quite a lot as well. So Courtney's at the MMA lab as well now, so I'm expecting her to come in with a good game plan here. She needs to limit her kicks, because Cynthia, we'll talk about Cynthia in a minute, but Cynthia's very good at hitting takedowns off kicks. She needs to just use her hands, try and use that power and size advantage to win the stand up here. Cynthia Calvillo trains, I don't know if she's with Alpha Male anymore or not. She's still training with Justin Buckles, but I think they've kind of got their own thing going. I think she might kind of flit in and out of Team Alpha Male, but I don't think she's there full time anymore. But Cynthia, very, very strong grappler, really, really good grappler. Everyone she's taken to the mat she's absolutely dominated. Real high level grappler. I went and I didn't watch kind of every second of every fight, but I did go through every one of Cynthia's fights, because the big thing for me in this fight that I had in the back of my mind is Cynthia's fight IQ. She's obviously a great grappler. Her hands are actually okay. She's got decent boxing, but at the end of the day, she did get outstruck by Carla Esparza, who has improved most definitely, but she did get outstruck by Carla Esparza in rounds 2 and 3. So it's, you know, her hands are okay. But if you said to me that this fight with Cortney is going to be on the feet for 3 rounds, I would lean towards Cortney, because she's got the power advantage. She will land the more eye-catching shots that I think the judges are going to favour. But Cynthia is a really good grappler. But what I went and was looking for specifically in tape was how urgent she is with her takedowns and how she hits her takedowns, because in my mind I had that she's not very urgent with takedowns, and a lot of her takedowns are off court kicks, and ultimately she isn't urgent with takedowns, and a lot of them are off court kicks. In fact, pretty much all of them. She hit a takedown on Carla Esparza in round 1, which wasn't off a court kick, and she hit one on Calderwood, which wasn't off a court kick, but Jojo was in the midst. She was about to throw a kick, and I think it kind of, her feet were caught betwixt in between, and she was, when Calvillo got the body lock, her feet were a little bit tied up, and it allowed her to get the takedown pretty easy. But otherwise it's all court kick takedowns that she's hitting, or she's reversing people off takedown attempts they're attempting on her. She does go for some body lock takedowns. That's literally the only takedown I've seen her attempt. It's like a body lock takedown that she doesn't set it up very well. You can see it coming a mile away, and it's been pretty much stuffed by everyone except for Carla Esparza. And on the one occasion with Joanne where I think her feet got caught in a little bit of a muddle because she was about to throw a kick. So, but on the mat she's so good. I just wish she went for takedowns more. I am going to pick Cynthia here to win. I think she can get a submission because she's so dominant on the mat. I mean, the best grappler she's faced is Carla Esparza. Only hit the mat once in the first round. I mean, she dominated Carla in first round. Carla did escape towards the end of the round, but for a good 3.5 minutes she was just totally dominated on the mat. Cortney's only been submitted once. It was like a second pro fight against Pel Gonzalez, and I didn't watch that fight for purposes here, but I have seen that fight in the past, and I remember Cortney was caught in a lot of submissions, managed to escape all of them until eventually succumbing in the 3rd round. So that was a long time ago though, and Cortney she's done well off her back considering how much time she spends on her back in fight. She does well off her back, but Cynthia is just her MMA grappling is really good, and I think she will dominate Cortney if she gets on top. Cortney needs to be smart. She can't be throwing lazy leg kicks here. She needs to just cut them out completely. Just use your hands. Then it comes down to, if Cynthia's not got a leg kick to catch, can she hit takedowns for 3 rounds to win the rounds if she can't get a finish? So she's minus 270. I can't bet her based on her fight IQ. If I knew Casey was going to come in and fight clever, no low kicks, throw nothing like that, just throw hands, then she's a live dog. And she is coming out of the MMA lab now. She's been there for her last few fights. Surely she comes in and fights smart. But one takedown and you're just sweating your ass off if you've bet Cortney, because Cynthia's that good on the floor. So I'm gonna pick Cynthia submission, but I do not recommend a bet at minus 270. I really think this is a live bet fight to see what the strategy of both girls is, because they've both got paths to victory here, but I question the fight IQ of both of them. So I'm looking forward to this fight, but I'm gonna pick Cynthia, but I would not be shocked if Cortney pulls this off, and I'm really going to be looking on live bet to see how Cortney's fighting. Is she throwing low kicks? Is she avoiding them completely? She needs to avoid kind of a Esparza when the kind of one that genuine takedown Cynthia's hit, and that was against Esparza, was Esparza kind of run into her and Cynthia used her momentum against her. Cortney's very rangy. She shouldn't need to punch her way in to the clinch to leave herself open to that body lock. So if she fights smart, she can win this fight. But it only takes one takedown with Cynthia. She is so good on the mat. So I'm going to pick Cynthia submission. But I think Casey's a live dog here, and I think that line's too wide. Keeping with the theme on this card of fights that I'm struggling to get a real solid read on, we move to the co-main event. We've got James Vick and Paul Felder, both clashing in the lightweight division. Both guys are big lightweights, especially James Vick. He's 6'3". He admitted he had a horrendous weight cut for the Justin Gaethje fight, where he got brutally knocked out in the first round. He has a 6-inch reach advantage over Paul Felder. It's also about 4 inches taller. Paul Felder, significant strikes landed per minute, 3.5. James is sitting just over 4. Both absorb a very similar number, basically 3. They don't go for takedowns. This is going to be a stand-up fight for 3 rounds, unless there's a finish, of course. So it's a really intriguing fight. James Vick is just, they seem to have put all the fighters that I struggle to get reads on one card here, because James Vick's another one that I've just always struggled to get a read on him. I've bet against him a few times and he's always fucked me and won the fights. The only time I've called a fight correctly with him was when I bet Dariush to beat him, and Dariush put him away. So James Vick is very rangy, quite box heavy. He'll use a long jab. He's very dangerous if you shoot in on him. He's got very long limbs, very good at locking up, kind of Bravo chokes, Darce chokes. You've got to be very careful with your neck. I don't expect that to play into fruition here. Paul Felder's going to keep it on the feet. But yeah, James is effective at what he does using his range. He's beaten some good fighters using that strategy. He beat Trinaldo before the Gaethje fight. He beat Joseph Duffy. I bet Duffy in that fight, and man, he was impressive. Duffy really struggled against him. Took out Paulo Hayes fight before that. Absolutely dominated Abel Trujillo. So Vick's he's a solid fighter. I do have question marks over his chin. He does have that tall man defense. Brutally knocked out by Dariush, and he is coming off of a knockout 6 months ago. Brutal knockout to Justin Gaethje. So I'm not overly sold on his chin. He got dropped by, I think Nick Hein dropped him a couple of times as well. So there are question marks about his chin, and a lot of it is probably that weight cut. At welterweight, you probably find he's more durable. But yeah, he has a massive weight cut, so that is definitely not going to help your chin. And he's coming back off a brutal knockout loss as well, which always makes me nervous if I'm looking to bet someone that they're coming back from a really bad knockout loss. I mean, he's been knocked out badly twice now. Is it going to kind of play in his mind, make him a bit hesitant, a bit gun shy? It's all things to bear in mind. Paul Felder, another guy who I've just never really had a great read on. He's 33 now. He's coming off a loss to Mike Perry. I think he had his arm broken in that fight. Real bloody fight he had with Perry. Prior to that, he had 3 impressive wins in a row over Charles Oliveira, Stevie Ray and Alessandro Ricci. I think he moved to name has gone from my mind, the camp, Duke Rufus's camp, for the Ricci fight, and he's been there since. He thinks it's a great fit for him. He feels he really works well with Duke Rufus. Feels he gels really well with Duke, and he looks really good in them performances. I've just always found Felder to be a little bit kind of low volume. I mean, you look at them 3 wins. Oliveira one was ground and pound. Stevie Ray was elbows when they was tied up against the fence. Richie, I think he did hurt at range and just finished him brutally, but Richie isn't a UFC caliber fighter. Prior to that, he got the really good win over Danny Castillo, spinning back fist KO. Edson Barboza, he won a decision over. Sorry, lost the decision to. Just got struck in that fight. Ross Pearson, he lost a split decision to. Very, very close fight, but the volume wasn't there. Darren Cruikshank, he got a submission over, but I didn't go back and watch it for this fight, but I'm pretty sure I had him 2 rounds down to Darren until he pulled the submission out. Josh Berkman, I mean, Josh was shot even, back in May 2016, and I remember he clearly won the fight 2-1, but it was 1-1 going into round 3. It didn't really offer Trinaldo much. He got stopped on a cut, but he was clearly losing the fight. And then, as I said, had them good 3 wins in a row, and then he had the loss to Mike Perry. So, Felder's a solid fighter, don't get me wrong, but I don't hold him in high regard. I don't hold James Vick in high regard, but I've been guilty of underestimating both of them in the past. Not so much Felder. I've not really bet on Paul Felder fights. From memory, I did bet him to beat Alessandro Ricci. I don't think I've bet on any of his fights otherwise, apart from that. Yeah, I don't think I've really touched his fights. I've definitely tried to fade James Vick a couple of times and it's bit me. The only time, as I said, I got it right was Dariush. So, and James is coming back from a bad knockout loss. Paul does have power, 10 of his 15 wins are by knockout. So, but I'm going to pick James Vick here. I think he's going to win a decision. I don't think any props are available yet, are they? No, because the only way James wins is inside the distance is if he can hit a submission on Felder, but I don't see that happening because Felder isn't going to shoot, surely. So I'd like to see what the decision line pays for Vick. As I said, my read isn't great, so it's not something I'm overly confident in picking, but I am going to pick Vick. I think he can do enough at range, work his jab, work his kicks from distance. Felder needs to get inside. I imagine he's going to try and throw leg kicks here, try and hurt Vick's legs. He's very tall for the division. He's going to have pretty skinny legs. I imagine he's going to target them, and he's going to have to try and get inside to touch that chin, which if he does, he could put Vick away, and Vick's coming back from a bad knockout. His chin, who knows, it could be done completely now. Especially if Vick has another bad cut, because that is definitely not helping his chin. But I think just going off Felder in the past, just not quite doing enough for me in terms of volume. I can see this being similar to the Trinaldo fight, and Vick just doing enough. Vick, he's got decent power himself, so Felder's very tough. I don't think he's ever been KO'd, but he's got one KO. The Trinaldo, that was a cut stoppage, so it's not a KO loss. He's never been stopped in my eyes with strikes, so I can't see Vick stopping him. But he does have power. He stopped Joseph Duffy, which I did not see coming at all. So the guy has power. I think he hurt Trinaldo in round 1 as well. So you've got to respect his power. Felder can't just come in here just trying to walk him down and get on the inside. He's got to be a bit cute with it. But I think Vick can do enough to win a decision here over 3 rounds with work from the outside. So I'm going to pick Vick by decision. The betting line, Felder's actually the favourite now. I think Vick has pretty much been the favourite since lines open, so it looks like that's changed fairly recently. And Felder, it's a small favourite now, so it's a hard fight to call, but especially now that I see he's the dog, I like James Vick there. Main event of the evening, Francis Ngannou taking on Cain Velasquez in the heavyweight division. Really excited to see Cain back in there. We've still got 6-7 days to go. I'm really hoping he's not going to pull out. Really want to see Cain back in there. Just a quick look over the stats. He's going to have a 6-inch reach disadvantage here, 3-inch height disadvantage. Man, Cain's stats are ridiculous for a heavyweight. He averages over 6 significant strikes landed per minute. Francis is down at 2. Absorbed a similar amount, 2 each. Cain's takedown average 5 takedowns per 15 minutes, 45% takedown accuracy. And the guy's a complete beast. For me, Cain Velasquez is the best heavyweight mixed martial arts has seen. It's just such a shame he's suffered so many injuries over the last few years. We haven't seen him for, Jesus, longer than I thought, July 2016. So we're looking, it's over 2.5 years since we last saw him. Damn. So basically, the last fight he had with Junior Dos Santos, the third fight, was October 2013. He didn't fight for, he had about 18 months off after that fight. Then he lost to Fabricio Verdum. And then he had 2 years out, beat Travis Brown, and now he's had over, it's going to be over 2.5 years. So this is going to be only his third fight in like almost 6 years. Jeez, the inactivity. Such a shame. He's had them injuries. Trains at AKA. Used to go to war with Daniel Cormier, but what, you know, the two best in the world training together. What great training partners they were. Cain has amazing cardio for a heavyweight. Or he gassed against Verdum, if you'll remember. I think that fight was at altitude. And he didn't acclimate. I think he got out there quite late, if I remember rightly. Yeah, but he gassed in that fight. First time we'd ever seen him in gas was before that. He'd set a just ridiculous pace for a heavyweight in fights. Solid stand-up. Not the biggest puncher, but just real high volume and just excellent wrestling. Looked good against Travis Brown when he had that comeback fight. But, Travis Brown isn't that great, so it's hard to read into how good he was there. I can't remember where I heard it, but people from his camp are apparently saying that Cain is looking fantastic and they can't wait to see him back in there. For me, as I said, he's the best heavyweight mixed martial arts has ever seen, but there's no way that these injuries haven't taken a big toll on him. I mean, he's still not that old for a heavyweight. He's 36, but just to have all this inactivity, he must have had some serious injuries. I know he's had back problems, knee problems, surgeries. AKA notorious for very hard training that they've received a lot of stick for. Probably gym wars probably haven't helped him either. But yeah, 2.5 years out. Before that, 2 years out. Before that, 18 months out. The guy's not fought regular since 2013. So, as I said, third fight in nearly 6 years. If he survives round 1, he probably wins this fight. Having said all that, it's very hard for me to fade Cain because I know how good he is. But we have seen him caught early in a fight before, Junior Dos Santos. So he's not superhuman, and we did see him lose to Fabricio Verdum in a fight that he gassed. But the game plan here surely is going to be, he needs to avoid Francis's power shots in round 1. He's going to have to try and clinch, try and get him down, try and tire him out, because we've seen Francis against Miocic gas. I imagine Cain's going to take a similar approach here as to the Miocic fight. Kind of Ngannou got a little bit written off after the Derek Lewis fight, and rightly so. I bet him against Derek Lewis, and God knows what that performance was like. Still can't wrap my head around that. But came back and he took out iron-jawed Curtis Blades in the first round. So I'm gonna pick Ngannou here. I just don't know what version of Cain we're going to get. And as a better, when we're looking at an almost 2-to-1 underdog who is possibly the most dangerous fighter in MMA in round 1, taking on a guy who has been stopped once before in round 1, who has been very inactive over the last few years, and not by choice because of injuries. I mean, I'd love it if Cain came out and it was vintage Cain and he puts on a vintage performance and he looks at his best, because if he stays healthy, there's the champ's back basically. I don't know what they'd actually do, because DC's obviously the heavyweight champ, and I'm pretty sure those two won't fight each other. But yeah, it's all about, even if Cain wins, it's about him staying healthy. But I'd love it if he comes out and doesn't look diminished at all. I mean, even a prime Cain would have to be extremely careful in round 1, because Ngannou can take anyone out in the first round. So I am going to pick Ngannou in round 1 though. I think Cain might look a bit rusty. Surely he's going to be a bit slower. He's aged. He's had a lot of surgeries. Gym wars have caught up with him. So for me, the value's on Ngannou. I can't fault anyone for taking a stab at him. I definitely wouldn't be playing Cain here. Line's come down a bit actually, minus 200 now. But yeah, I just couldn't play him at that price. I just don't know what version of Cain we're going to get. It's impossible to know, to have confidence in him coming out and looking like vintage Cain. And who knows? I mean, if he takes a bit of damage in round 1, he might gas himself. We've seen him gassed. You know, if we're going off recent fights, he gassed in a couple of rounds against Felder. It's unlikely, but there's just too many question marks over Cain and where he's at. And Ngannou's going to have his confidence back after that win over Blades. He needs to be careful, Ngannou. He can't come out swinging wildly, because he doesn't want to end up on his back here, because he's going to be in big trouble if he is. I think Cain will stop him, whereas Miocic didn't put him away. I think Cain will. But first round is going to be extremely dangerous for Cain, so I'm going to pick Ngannou here to win by knockout in the first round. But if this does leave round 2 advantage to Cain, and Cain probably gets the victory, but official pick is I'm gonna pick Ngannou here. But I really hope Cain comes back and looks vintage Cain. So that's the picks for this week done, guys. Check out prommmabetting.com. Give me a follow on Twitter at prommmabetting. Subscribe to the channel. Packages are on the website if you want to get this week's picks. We also offer audio live betting for this week, and the card's on Sunday as well, so just bear that in mind. It's not a Saturday card this week, it is a Sunday card. So good luck with all your picks and your bets, and I'll be back for next week's UFC. Cheers, guys.